Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing a deep dive academic review of a genuinely fascinating debate. We're going to objectively map out a philosophical exchange between a Muslim apologist and an American atheist, specifically looking at how they use rhetorical analogies to try and reconcile the idea of a perfect creator with the messy, super high-stakes reality of human choice.
We're going to break this all down into 6 quick parts: the core inquiry, the classroom analogy, angels versus humans, the burden of choice, the medical college, and finally, the logic of worship.
So, let's kick things off with Section 1, the core inquiry, focusing on purpose and free will.
Right off the bat, the atheist in our source text drops a massively challenging question on the table. If a supreme being is already completely perfect and entirely self-sufficient, what is the logical point of creating the universe? And more specifically, why create humans just to test and judge them? I mean, if God doesn't actually need anything, why introduce a chaotic variable like free will, especially when you know for a fact it guarantees some people will fail and suffer? It's a very compelling starting point that really demands a structured, logical response.
Moving right along to Section 2, the classroom examination analogy, which tackles divine non-interference.
To answer that initial critique, the apologist brings in a really relatable analogy. They argue that earthly life essentially functions as a giant standardized test. Imagine you're a student sitting down for a highly regulated final exam. The parameters are all set, the curriculum was already taught, and now you as the individual are completely responsible for whatever answers you put down on that paper. Think about it. The teacher is walking the aisles. If a student writes down that 2 + 2 = 5, the teacher obviously sees it. They know it's completely wrong. But, and here is the kicker, they can't just walk over, erase it, and write 4. If they did that, it completely ruins the integrity of the test. The apologist argues this is exactly how free will works. If God constantly stepped in to stop us from making bad choices or sinning, well, free will wouldn't actually exist at all.
Which leads us directly into Section 3, angels versus humans and a hierarchy of will.
Now, to really grasp this hierarchy, we need to get super specific about how this apologist defines free will. In this academic framework, it's all about agency. It is the literal mechanical capacity to actively choose to disobey a divine command. This sets up a stark, really fascinating contrast: involuntary obedience versus voluntary submission. Take angels, for example. According to this text, angels do not have free will. They are perfectly obedient by their very nature. It's like they're pre-programmed entities that literally cannot disobey. Humans, though, we possess independent choice. We absolutely can, and let's be honest, frequently do choose to disobey.
And this brings us to a brilliant theological conclusion in the apologist's argument. A conscious being who actively chooses to do the right thing is logically superior to a being that's just programmed to do it. If a human has all the temptation in the world and the full capacity to mess up, but still independently chooses to align their will with the divine, they actually elevate themselves. In this framework, that makes the righteous human superior to the angel, simply because the human had to actively overcome their own agency to submit.
All right, Section 4, the burden of choice and accepting the risk.
The source backs this concept up with some heavy scriptural evidence to show just how massive this burden of free will actually is. It cites chapter 33, verse 72 of the Qur'an, stating that this immense burden, referred to as the trust, was actually offered to the heavens, the earth, and the mountains first, but no way they completely refused to carry it out of pure fear of failing the test. They opted for the safety of just being obedient, non-volitional creations.
But humanity? The text actually suggests humanity was kind of foolish, or maybe just totally ignorant of the sheer gravity of this test when we accepted it. We took on the ultimate risk. We gambled that guaranteed safety for a shot at the ultimate reward, accepting the danger of failure just to potentially reach a totally unique, elevated status.
Now for Section 5, the medical college metaphor, exploring the necessity of distinction.
To explain why this test is so incredibly rigorous, the apologist maps out a really clear metaphor. Living your life on Earth, that's the grueling entrance exam. Gaining admission to this elite medical college represents getting into heaven, or Jannah. But graduating with top distinction, that is the exact equivalent of reaching Jannat al-Firdaus, the absolute highest tier of paradise.
The whole logic here completely hinges on scarcity. I mean, you can't have a situation where 100% of applicants get accepted into the absolute best medical school in the world. If everyone gets in regardless of merit, the prestige literally means nothing. According to this framework, heaven operates on that exact same logic of exclusivity.
The intense rigor of the test is exactly what justifies the ultimate reward for those who strive for excellence. If everyone passed automatically, distinction wouldn't even exist.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, the logic of worship. Who actually benefits from praise?
The atheist raises a super common yet really profound philosophical critique here. It seems kind of absurd for an all-powerful, totally self-sufficient entity to demand constant praise. If God is truly infinite, why command humans to say God is great millions of times? Does the Creator suffer from a massive ego problem that just desperately needs constant human validation?
The apologist counters this with an emergency room analogy. Imagine a guy suffers a massive heart attack right on the sidewalk. By some wild coincidence, the absolute top cardiologist in the world, let's call him Dr. X, is walking right past. For that dying patient to survive, they have to actively call out, acknowledge Dr. X's supreme skill, and desperately ask for his intervention.
So who actually benefits here? Dr. X, who represents the Creator, doesn't suddenly gain new medical skills or intrinsic value or an ego boost just because a dying person asks for help. The doctor is already great. It's the patient, the human, who gets the entire life-saving benefit. In this apologist framework, worship works the exact same way. It's not food for a needy creator's ego, it's a lifeline designed entirely to keep the human on track for salvation.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to really chew on. We've objectively mapped out how this source uses analogies, from standardized tests to medical schools to emergency rooms, to build an academic case for why a perfect creator would engineer such a high-stakes scenario. So what do you think? Does the immense, terrifying risk of possessing free will truly outweigh the profound, distinguishing reward of actively choosing to do good? It's a heavy philosophical question that sits right at the core of the human experience. Keep analyzing, keep asking questions, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.